Welcome to the Earth Keepers podcast. This podcast is for people who seek new and better ways to love and care for the earth. It's a podcast for anyone who is deeply concerned about the harm being done to the environment on a local and global level. It's a podcast that builds community and connection between people of like heart and mind, people who believe that earth care should be integrated into every aspect of life, and for many in the Earth Keepers community, that includes our spiritual lives. Welcome, friends, to the Earth Keepers podcast. Hey, Earth Keepers. As you'll have gathered from the last episode, which was the first episode of Season 5, a main focus for the coming year will be the question, how do we green every vocation? The core assumption behind that question is that anyone who works, from data processors to dance instructors, from homemakers to hairdressers or sales reps to social workers, anyone can find ways to do their jobs in ways that do good for the environment. I use those words quite deliberately because throughout Season 5, we're not going to be seeking just to discover how we can do less harm in our vocational practices. Rather, we'll be trying to figure out how we can have a net positive impact on the planet and how in our work we enact change either directly or indirectly towards environmental restoration and healing. In this episode, we'll be talking with TJ Fittis, owner of Camano Island Coffee Roasters. I became a fan and a customer of Camano Island Coffee way back in 2006 when I asked the company's founder, my friend Jeff Ericson, to come lecture in a course I was teaching. This course was all about social entrepreneurship. And for those not familiar with the term, a social enterprise is a business that exists not just for financial profit, but also for social benefits that somehow make the world a better place. Jeff was a great person to help me teach social entrepreneurship because in the year 2000, he had founded Camano Island Coffee Roasters as a means of supporting ethical farming practices, fair pricing and wages, and most importantly, the production of great tasting organic coffee. To accomplish these social and environmental objectives, Jeff partnered early on with a nonprofit called Agros. That's an organization that helps the very poor in Central America to gain access to land for farming and to establish new cooperative villages. Eventually, Jeff sold the company to his son-in-law, TJ, who continues to pursue those founding values of making the world a better place by practicing good and profitable business principles. But even if you're not a business person, there is still a lot of wisdom in this conversation that can help all of us to make more earthwise choices as consumers. That's where I begin my conversation with TJ, in fact, with the ways in which Camano Island Coffee uses their subscription-based model that they call the Coffee Club to provide high-quality, organic products that are better for the consumer, for farmers, and the environment. TJ, welcome to the podcast. One thing I'm hoping you can do for me and our listeners is to help us make wiser and more informed choices about the coffee we drink, and basically help us to become more responsible coffee consumers through awareness of what goes into producing coffee that's good for people and planet. Perhaps you could tell us about some of the founding values of Camano Island Coffee Roasters that make your products healthier, as well as more socially and environmentally just.
Inevitably, what happened was, when Jeff was getting this going, is he made decisions along the way with the idea of not just trying to make money, but trying to do something that's better from start to finish. And so that started with how the coffee is grown, where it's grown, how we're purchasing it, what we're looking for, how we're roasting it, and then how we're getting it to a customer. So for the end user, we do a lot of different events where we're sampling coffees, and people will say, well, where can I buy this? Because it's maybe us, and there's maybe a salsa company down the way, and they're like, well, we're at this grocery store, that grocery store. And my answer to that is, we can't buy it anywhere. And they kind of look at us like, well, then how do I buy it? You know, well, we almost exclusively sell this coffee to our club. And that is kind of the end of the cycle as far as this kind of social enterprise is concerned. But it really is part of this whole doing the taste better, right? Mm-hmm. Because you're kind of working backwards to the club. We ship it directly to you. We're able to roast it, ship to order in small batches, which means it's fresher when it gets to you. And that makes a huge difference in flavor. Mm-hmm. But then we're bypassing any of the middlemen. There's no distributors, there's no warehouses where it's sitting for months on end, there's no grocery stores. They all take a piece of the pie. And it's a lot simpler to sell coffee that way. You get some big grocery store accounts and your work is done. But instead, we've had conversations on a weekly basis where we need to talk to people and share a coffee with them and sample it and ask them to join us in this endeavor. And as a result of that, there's a bigger piece of the pie to purchase higher grade coffees at better price for them, and also commit revenue back to our nonprofit partners that are also making a difference in those countries. So if we were going mass market on that, there would be less flexibility with it. So from the very beginning, Jeff made the commitment to only buying organic, which is a lot harder than it sounds actually, just because of all of the different regulations and rules associated with it, and not just for us, but for the farmers as well. And because it's a club, we want lots of variety. So we're bringing coffees in from, depending on the year, anywhere from 12 to 14 different countries. They always have to be USDA certified organic. And so we're sampling different coffees for quality, but also we're really sifting through all of the different offerings to find the ones that we think not just taste great, but are meeting this criteria of being only organic. And the doing good part of that is, one, we think it's healthier for us, right? It's a more natural way to cultivate coffee. It's a more expensive way because the yield isn't as great. It's also better for the farmers. You know, a lot of these countries don't have the same regulation and standards on pesticide usage as we do here in the West. And so there are these horror stories coming out of some of these countries where the farmer will get this, whatever it is, off the shelf that we've maybe banned for years. They use it, maybe poison themselves or poison their family. You know, it's all their clothes or something when they get home. And so the organic thing is more important than just what we get as the end users. It's also how does it impact the farmers and their families at origin. And then as far as how the coffee is grown, the organic lends itself to a real environmental difference, right? Because one of the ways that you can mitigate pests and different issues there is by growing it more holistically, or going organically within the existing ecosystem. So coffee is a great crop to grow in rows like corn and have the machines come through and pick it. But over time, that leaches the soil out. It diminishes the resources in the soil to use to recycle through. And so cultivating it organically, you have to grow it within the existing ecosystem. So that's with other plants. Biodiversity is paramount to help mitigate the pests and have different variety of flora growing with the coffee. And so what that also does is it results in better tasting coffee. It takes longer to grow. It's a smaller yield, which results in a higher price. The farmer gets paid for the coffee. So it's safer for them. We think it's better for us. It would certainly taste better, and they get a better price for it. So the organic thing really is a cornerstone of what we do here. The next part is the club, which was talked about. That's another key piece that makes it all work, because our club members really are partners with us. And we know what to buy based on what our club members like. And so we have very little waste. We're able to pick top product what we have. And then we roast them in small batches. So we're doing upwards of 300,000 pounds a year on a 50-pound coffee roaster. So what that means is that we have to work a lot harder than the next guy, because we're having to do several cycles more than most coffee roasters. And so that creates more work for us here in the States. So we employ more people, maybe we should, but we know that it has a real impact on flavor. It's a smaller roast. You have a tighter control on temperature. So you're able to roast light, medium, dark without burning the beans. And then shipping it right to the consumer within 48 hours, it makes a huge difference with flavor. So the whole model of doing good tastes better, and the social enterprise idea, it permeates every step of the process in the company. And it really guided our decision-making, and was done with the best of intentions, but the unforeseen result of that is just better tasting coffee.
Yeah.
You know, and so as we learned along the way, different things that work in Delbert, we refine that process, but we think that that's why the coffee tastes as great as it does for those different reasons.
Now, shade grown is another of the hallmarks of your coffee and how you source the coffee. Tell us the importance of that.
Yeah, so the shade grown thing really comes back to the cultivation side, right? And how they're dealing with how they're growing it throughout the season, right? And so when you're growing it within shade grown, people sometimes get decided like, okay, it's like a dense rainforest and it's completely shaded. That's not really what's happening there. Really what it is a biodiversity thing, right? Where you've got a plethora of different plants that are growing within your farm. And so some of your trees that you're going to grow will be shorter. Some of your coffee trees will be shorter than your other trees that are there. They're helping provide bird habitat and variety, diversity to the soil. What it does is your yield is lower per hectare because there's less space, but it's healthier for the soil long term. And it also causes the coffee to grow slower, which results in better tasting coffee, right? So it starts with the approach of not using synthetic pesticides, though, right? Because if you could use synthetic pesticides, any of the natural pests that you have to deal with, the pesticides just solve that problem, right? And so you cut corners. You can more densely pack the land with coffee trees and get a higher yield. But if you're trading something for that, right, you're having to use a synthetic chemical on the coffee. And what does that do to the coffee? How's that changing the coffee as it develops, how it grows? One of the reasons the coffee tastes the way it does is the terroir for its grown. So the type of soil, the elevation, the rainfall, all of these things play a role. And you're spraying these trees with pesticides. It's going into the soil, and then eventually the coffee cherry is developing on the vine, and inside that coffee cherry is a pit that gets processed and turned into what we think of as coffee today, right? The idea that pesticides don't have some impact on that growth cycle, just biologically, is something that we've always felt strongly about. There's not really great studies on it, but that's because the companies with the money to do the studies, it's conflict of interest, and they're not going to do those studies. So the shade grown part is kind of before the advent of these synthetic pesticides, all the coffee gets grown like that. That was the way that it grew the best. It just grew naturally with the other flora on your farm. And so it's kind of a slow grow approach. It's kind of a getting back to basics and a focus on quality over quantity, which lends itself to sourcing higher quality coffee costs more. There's less of it. But then our role in the process is kind of diminished. So when you're taking lower quality coffee, you're more roaster led. Your cooking method of the coffee is more important to get a consistent final product. Whereas us, sometimes people see our facility and they kind of amazed by how it all works. And it's like, honestly, it's really simple. We don't overcomplicate it. And part of the reason we get away with that is because the coffee is so good to begin with. Really, we try to let the coffee speak for itself. And so it's really more coffee bean led than roaster led. The roasts are fairly simplistic. We don't do a lot of blends. And we're able to do that because it's our name, because it's shade grown. And it results in better tasting honey.
I remember being in Nicaragua with Jeff as these new farmers who were just starting the coffee plantations were talking to him. He was really teaching against resistance when he was trying to persuade them that in the long run, going organic is going to be important. And I understood the conflict because on the one hand, they see the more conventional pesticide-driven model does produce more coffee equals more dollars, right? I mean, that could be an easy assumption to make. But he was trying to persuade them that in the long run, you're producing better coffee. It's better for your families, better for the environment, and you're going to get a higher price. And I think coming from him as a coffee distributor, he had a lot of authority to say that, and they would believe him. But I'm wondering how much is education of farmers part of the mission of the company at this point?
Yeah, I think it's a complex issue at origin. It's one of those things where, especially we in the West kind of want these like simple sound bites. Sure. And it's like, how much time do you have to explain that issue, right? And it's one of those things where, and usually if I get a chance to talk to somebody, I'll spend the time to kind of go through this, but it's not as simple as to say, well, just don't use pesticides, throw this product and we'll buy it, right? The farmers that we help through Agros and Food for Farmers, these are the poorest folks there. There are farmers that do very well in Central America that have hundreds of hectares of land that are producing thousands of pounds of coffee. Those farmers are often farmers that we're buying from because they have the higher quality coffee. And we incentivize them to go organic because those are the ones we're choosing to decide to buy. The farmers that we help through Agros and Food for Farmers are not those farmers. These are farmers that don't have that kind of generational wealth. Some of the farmers that we're buying from it was started by their grandfather or great-grandfather, right? It's passed down, and they do great work. That's not to diminish what they do. But what about other families that don't have those opportunities, right? And that's where Agros really steps in because land is available. These people don't have access to capital, to credit to buy that land. And they also don't have the expertise. So they're left with day laborer positions, construction positions, maybe they move to the city. And so it's a much more complicated issue, right? It ends up impacting the culture of these people in rural Guatemala and Nicaragua.
Well, speaking of certification, there's another authentication, we'll say, that comes from the fair trade label. You use the phrase fairly traded when you describe the coffee. Tell me the difference and why it is that you make this nuanced alternative approach to buying the coffee.
Yeah, so here's the thing. A lot of our coffee is fair trade certified. We just don't use the verbiage. More often than not, it is fair trade. But the way that works in that world is you have to pay for that certification. So we have to carve off some of our revenue and pay it into a separate organization, Transfer USA, that administers and owns the trademark for fair trade, right? That's not just coffee, that's lots of products. And the way that works is there's a premium on top of the commodity. You have the commodity price that's traded on the futures market, right? Historically, it's usually around like $1.50 to $2, somewhere in there. And then fair trade is like 25 cents on top of that, something like that. So it's not a lot. And what happens is we have to pay Transfer USA certification. The farmer has to pay to be fair trade certified. So the farmer has to pay a third party a fee to say, yes, we will receive fair trade funds. It's a marketing scheme and it does great work. I don't want to diminish or make it sound like we don't agree with what they're doing. We just chose to do it in a different way, right? Where we feel like we have a little more control over it. There's less money going to overhead and more money going directly to the farmers, right? And so oftentimes, depending on the coffee, we're paying over the fair trade rate. In fact, I don't think there's a single time where we're below the fair trade. We're really above the fair trade. And like I said, we are buying coffees that are fair trade certified sometimes. But the other thing that can sometimes happen with fair trade, and this has been documented before, is that coffee is not an exact science. They're brilliant. Things can go wrong. And so if you're a farmer and you're like, I know I can get top dollar for this organic stuff because it's been graded, it's been evaluated, they've sampled it, they know that it tastes really good. Actual objective, people have sampled the coffee and know what it's like. And then you have these other coffees that just based on maybe the level of defects involved in them, the color changes, this one just isn't going to go as well. So I'm not going to get top dollar for it. Well, I'll put that in the fair trade bin. So when I'm buying fair trade, it's called FTO, it's fair trade organic. So it's got all the different markers. But there is also this other bucket of just fair trade. A lot of times that's when you'll see it in a grocery store where it's not organic, but it is fair trade. And what it does is it creates this bad experience, right? Where you get fair trade coffees that don't taste as good because the farmer's trying to get top dollar for it. It is, but it's not based on the coffee being evaluated for its quality. It's just based on this arbitrary, we're all deciding to pay more for this coffee, not because it's better, but just because it says fair trade on it. And so it's not really free market in a lot of ways. It's not something that rewards the best work. And so for all of those reasons, it was kind of something that felt counterintuitive to Jeff's vision for the company. And so for us, we feel like we can do a better job outside of fair trade, knowing that a lot of it is considered fair trade and is going to the farmers, but also allowing us more wiggle room to support our nonprofit partners that we know directly. We have a relationship with them that are helping the farmers that we feel have the highest need.
Yeah. You keep coming back to farmers. There's a lot of attention on the sourcing of the coffee. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about how the company supports the life and work of the farmers, the sourcing companies.
Yeah, so it's a big world. And for me to try and pretend that I'm like an expert in all of it would be false, right? It's too big for any one person to be really, really good at. And so we focus on the things that we're good at here. I like to think that over the years, I've developed a palate and know what tastes good. And we have our different sourcing partners to help us with the import-export side of things. They're evaluating coffees and they have different ratings. And then in helping the farmers at origin, we really lean on our nonprofit partners. Those guys, they don't know how to roast coffee, but they know how to get farmers that they don't have roads to their farms type of thing. They know how to get to these people and reach them and educate them and give them access to credit that they would not otherwise have. And in both of the nonprofits we support, Agros and Food for Farmers, both of them have folks in country that are the experts, right? So it's not you or me going down there telling them, well, here's how you should grow coffee, because I don't know how to grow coffee. That's not my business, right? Whereas there are people that are native Guatemalans that are down there that have agronomy degrees that go into the farms and help the farmers get the best yield that they can get. There are economists that are in country that are actually from there. So not a white savior kind of deal. And so for us, it's the decentralization idea, right? It's like focus on the thing that you're good at, support other people and the work that they're good at, and all ships kind of rise type of thing, right? So we talk about it, we promote it, we can sell what's happening and use coffee as a vehicle for that. But we really lean on Agros and Future Farmers to do the work that they're doing. And so Agros, they started primarily as like a bank, essentially, as a system for buying land and bringing together families and forming little communities around these plots of land, and then giving them a process where not just the expertise in growing, but also the access to markets. The executive director of Agros today is Alberto Solano, who was an economist with the Grameen Foundation. He is from Guatemala, works right here in Seattle. Like, he has made huge inroads in connecting the Agros villages with markets here in the United States, and so expanding their sales opportunities. So he's not down there showing them how to plant coffee trees or how to plant chili pepper trees, but he's showing them how to sell those same chili peppers to Walmart and how to get top dollar for the product. So we are always just inspired by the work that those guys are doing. We know we play a small role in it. We play the best tasting part of the whole equation. You know, you can drink coffee all the time, but talk about it. And Jeff felt this way too, I think, when he was running the company. It was really the guys at Agros and Future Farmers that were doing the real work of helping the farmers, really giving them a hand up as opposed to a hand out.
I think maybe another advantage of relying or trusting on other people to do their work well is that the work goes well beyond farming. I mean, in the case of Agros, for example, they're creating whole communities, right? And there's so much else that's involved in supporting the farmer, including helping them to begin schools for their children, mobilizing the community around health services. I'm wondering, what else do you see your support of organizations like Agros doing?
Yeah, it's one of those things where they're just providing credit and here's your plot of land and good luck. It wouldn't really work, right? And so over the years, they found different things that make a real difference. And a lot of it's just common sense, you know, it's depending on where the markets are at, just the crops you're going to focus on, what we recommend that you focus on. If you can triple your yield out of this one plot of land, if you have a gas-powered rototiller, then let's help you get that. So it's not so much just helping them get the land and then just leaving them. It's providing them with access to markets, it's providing equipment, training, it's helping them start their own businesses. There's numerous examples of women-owned businesses in the Agros villages where maybe the family owns a farm and they're growing different crops, but then the wife is running a convenience store. These people aren't just working farms all day long. They've got their own commerce, their own economies that they're building in rural Central America. And so what's happened as a result of that is we're getting into like second and third generations that either take over the farm or some of them are leading the farms and are going to university and becoming doctors and nurses and so forth, teachers. And so that's been an inspiration for us too, is to see these folks that started off as maybe children that lived in a landfill that grow up and start their own families and get a chance. They're just given a chance with this piece of land and they're able to turn it into something where their kids are coming back and starting schools within this village that didn't exist 20 years ago. So it's kind of just building a society, you know, it's building community that is doing life. It's way more than just coffee, but that'd be a great place to start with it.
I would imagine that in your line of work, you come across social and environmental challenges often. You see sometimes firsthand in your travels even, some of these big problems that some of which you're trying to address through your work. But I'm wondering, what is it that keeps you motivated and what gives you hope?
I think it's kind of a little bit what I said earlier, as far as there's a lot of big problems in the world. We have big problems here at home. And I think if we just focus on all the problems, just kind of go a little crazy. And so I used to think like, well, if we could only do this and we could only do that, and it just seems so simple. We just solve problems with this. The reality is there's only so much that's our responsibility. I'm a small piece of a much larger machine. And that's not to diminish my role or say that I don't have responsibility, but it just means that I can't just solve things on my own. It takes a group of people working together towards a common goal. So that's one of the things I learned is it's not just me. get rid of this hero complex. My role is what it is, and I should do it, but I'm not necessarily insulting on myself, which takes all the pressure off. But along with that, just looking at the things that are right in front of me and being grateful for them. So, in my own personal life or just in work here, we've got lots to be grateful for. I think that's what's helped me oftentimes when I see things or challenges, like, man, it just seems insurmountable. Yeah, but look at all the good that is happening. And so the value of that is not to stick your head in the sand and ignore the problems. It's just there's an energy that comes from being grateful. There's an energy from focusing on the good that's there, right? And then taking that and apply it to the problem. And so you're coming at it from a more positive outlook. And I think in that you have new solutions come to the fore because you have this more positive energy. So that is just on an inward process. That's what's helped me. But also in working with Agros and fruit farmers and meeting them, just the inspiration of their work. Again, it comes back to this gratitude thing. You'll meet them or you'll talk to the farmers and you'll see the work that they're doing, and maybe they'll share a video, here this new farm will work on, and you realize how grateful and how excited and how happy they are. And like, your house doesn't have windows or you have a dirt floor, right? And it just puts in perspective my life, right? And so that's kind of this idea of gratitude. It's like I'm inspired by what they do and how they're focused on solving the problems that they face, but they come at it from such a positive outlook. And again, it all comes back to gratitude. And I think I mentioned earlier, they see the work that Agros does in the farm. It's an actual miracle.
We've been in conversation with TJ Fittis about how doing business for the common good actually leads to more profits and greater success. Now, for our American listeners, let me add a final note. If you join the Camano Island Coffee Club, not only will you get great tasting, organic, fairly traded coffee delivered to your home, church, or business, you'll also be supporting this podcast. If you sign up for a coffee club subscription through the links on the Earthkeepers website, Camano Island Coffee Roasters will donate 10% of all future proceeds to the podcast. And to make it an even better deal, your first pound of coffee is free for you to try. Again, this offer is sadly only available in the US, and you have to sign up through the Earthkeepers website, so please do. I'm Forrest Tinsley, your podcast host. Our executive producer is James Avedon, and our producer is Dave Olfers. Colleen Megerly is our editor and researcher. Forrest Reed is the creator of our original music, and Jesselyn Gentry is our social media director. Thank you, friends, for listening, and please join us for our next conversation on the Earthkeepers podcast.